Hey guys, Chris here from Carolot Farm. Good morning and welcome. I am currently sitting in the shade of the front porch and I am working to finish up my second cup of coffee. This is how I love to start each day, if at all possible, with just 2 quiet cups of coffee. And it gives me time to think about the day ahead and what needs to be accomplished. First thing, I have to put my hat on and my sun shirt on. I haven't even done that, which is kind of silly, right? I'm always sporting my hat. But that's because I've not yet left the shade of the front porch, which I love. I'm so happy to be out here this morning. It's not too hot just yet, but it does feel like it might be a little humid today. So I want to get an earlier start to things if I can. But first things first, it's that second cup of coffee. Like I told you, I'm just finishing it up, and then I'll get all my gear on and we will get the day started. But there are several things I want to show you today. And now that it is approaching the middle of June, I want to get into the garden. I want to talk about the horses and some updates and just kind of give you some general insight as to where we are and what we're up to here on the farm right now. As I am allowing the grain to moisten inside, I wanted to step out and show you something, and that is this new side paddock here. We finished this wood fencing a few weeks ago, and the minis have been slowly spending more and more time out here in this little paddock. There's a fair amount of grass, and so we want to gradually increase the amount of time that they spend out here eating. So that's kind of an update. You know, I think we just finished this a couple weeks ago, and it's been really, really handy. So that will now give us three like primary turnouts. We have the front paddock or the front ring, we have the back field, and then we have this lower side paddock that sits below the garden right here beside me, and it sits beside the back field. So it's the lower side paddock. As I'm already outside, I want to show you the garden because the garden is at a very special place in its journey through the year here. The garden, I would say, is probably at its peak glory right now. Pretty soon, things will start dying off, and that is just the natural life cycle in a garden. First crop we have here that is really, past its prime are the sugar snap peas. And pretty soon, the whole garden, though, will kind of be heading into that next phase. And although the tomatoes are very happy right now, and they will soon be producing, that oftentimes leads to the plants beginning to kind of dry up a little. And so they start to turn, they don't look as beautiful. So, as we head into the summer months, the tomatoes will start to not be quite as pretty. The peppers do pretty good though. They should be looking pretty nice all summer long. We have 2 rows of peppers. And then we have our squash and our zucchini. And these plants are still just beginning to grow. But if you have ever planted squash and zucchini, you know that they are prone to having real issues with squash bugs and other insects. And so we have dusted them a little here. They've not started to flower and fruit just yet. But once the bushes, the squash and zucchini bushes and plants get nice and tall, some of them start to wither up and not look so great. So again, this might be the prettiest they look. You just never really know. We then have our okra. The okra though will continue to look quite nice. That's what these last 2 rows are here. These are okra. They usually look real nice all summer long. But again, the tomatoes and the squash and zucchini do start to not look so hot. Another thing I will note about the summer garden, as much weeding as I try to do, and as much as we try to stay on top of it with cardboard and just, mowing around the edges if we have room for a mower, we still begin to lose the garden to weeds. The grass does begin to take over a little. It gets a little wild around the edges here. Some of the paths, I'm not always able to keep them completely clear, like this one here, when I get more cardboard, I will certainly cover that grass. But there are just some parts of the garden that do get a little wild at this time of year. And so I want to show you the garden right now because I feel that it's kind of at its most beautiful spot. You know, most things have been pretty well weeded. We've got a fair amount of cardboard down. The plants are still by and large nice and green and happy. You know, the potatoes here at the edge of the garden, they're still real green and happy, but pretty soon they will begin, to dry up, and that tells us that it's soon time to pick and harvest the potatoes. But again, right now they're green, they're lush, they're pretty to look at, but pretty soon they'll be kind of brown and not looking so hot. But again, that's just the natural life cycle in the garden. You know, here I wanted to show you I have a basil plant and I've weeded nicely around the basil. However, you know, I didn't have time to then weed this large open patch beside the basil. You know, you move a little farther and there I have my dill plants, and again I have weeded around them. So it's just a matter of time sometimes and how soft the ground is. Sometimes when we get a good soaking rain, I can get a lot of weeding done, but the most important thing to weed is going to be around the plants themselves and not that space in between. I will also share that when we put cardboard down on the pathways, we also sometimes just toss our weeds here. And that way the weeds will dry up and then we can remove them from the cardboard without fear of them kind of re-rooting. Behind me, our winter compost has been taken over by birdhouse gourds. When these first popped up, we thought, oh wow, maybe they're cucumbers. No, they're birdhouse gourds. And so we went ahead and we gave them a fence to climb up. We harvested a bunch of birdhouse gourds from 2 plants last winter. Well, I guess the plants grew last summer, and then we harvested the seeds out of them to actually kind of hollow them out. And that's where these guys came from. I hope you enjoyed kind of taking a peek at the garden. Again, I think it's the most beautiful it will be all summer now. I have my sun shirt on now. I have grain. Where's that grain? There's the grain. I have grain for Sweetheart and for Rocky. Sweetheart is looking really, really good. I'm really happy with her weight, and I have decided to cut her back to just 1 pound of the Triple Crown Senior now. You know, I think I said earlier, it's approaching the middle of June, and she had been getting 1 pound and maybe 1/3. Originally it was 1.5 pounds, and then I cut it back a little, and I think it's time to cut it back just to 1 pound and watch her. You know, if it looks like she starts to drop weight, of course I'll add that little bit back. But she's looking really, really good. And Rocky, he is now getting 1/2 pound of Triple Crown Senior once a day. And I like that he is picking up a little weight. Slow and steady is always the best way to go. And so I don't want to give him any more than 1/2 pound. I can see that he is looking a little better. He was just a touch thin. So I'm happy with that. And then I'm still watching Shenanigans. He's our younger chestnut. I feel like he is kind of borderline. He's a little thinner than I would like. But at the same time, now that they're getting a little more grass in that new side paddock that I just showed you, I want to watch him for the next week or so and see, you know, does he pick up a little bit of weight, or does he continue to look just a little on the thin side? And if that is the case, I will start giving him just a little bit of grain as I did Rocky. Again, these guys are still young. We think they're maybe coming 4, coming 5. So I'm just going to watch him, and then I'll let you know if I start to grain him. I've just tied Sweetheart's bucket up to the fence so that she doesn't knock it over. And as I let her in, I want to show you something that I have been thinking about. And I can't do too many things at once. My brain had to stop because I was opening the gate and I couldn't keep my train of thought. But now that Sweetheart is in the feedlot eating happily, she says, "Thank you so much, I was hungry." now that she's eating, and again, I'm so distractible. I'm sorry, guys. I wanted to show you an area that I was just speaking to my husband about the other day about a potential third feedlot. You know, if I do start graining Shenanigans as well as Sweetheart and Rocky, I would ideally like to have another feedlot. I could close them in the barnyard. That could be done. I have, you know, these interlocking paddocks. I have my front ring or front paddock. I have the barnyard. And then behind me, I have that back field that, there you go, there's that back field. So I could close any number of gates and I could have Shenanigans eating in the barnyard. But I also have Snuggles, and they're oftentimes fast friends. They like to stick together. And I think it would just make my life easier if I had another feedlot. So I was looking around the barnyard and trying to figure out where would be the most ideal place to put another feedlot. And we have landed on this little front corner area behind me here. When you come in our entry gate here, you know, I have feedlots on this side. I have 2 feedlots here. And then there's this open space. That's where their water tub is. Their salt block is here. And I like having a little bit of an entryway, but I'm thinking about putting a feedlot just on the other side of that gate. And it would be in that corner area behind me. It would be another oversized feedlot. For minis, you know, they could spend several hours there and be just fine. When we get ready to do our next round of fencing, I do want to fence in this corner behind me, and then we'll have 3 feedlots that I can very easily separate the horses into. I had to come out and shake Rocky's bucket, but now Rocky's coming. He says, oh yes, I really would like my breakfast, please. I know the flies are bad, buddy. We need fly spray. I wanted to show you Sweetheart here. She is really looking nice. You know, we definitely don't want to overfeed these guys. So there's a fine line between needing to grain them and giving them too much. So I do need to monitor her weight. And, you know, I'm pleased with where she is now. And so we're going to back her off just a little. She does have that breathing condition. She has a bit of a cough. And that seems to be kind of wearing on her, and it just makes her body work a little harder, which is why she, I think, is needing a little grain for maintenance. Rocky here, you can see his belly is still a little furry. He has not entirely finished shedding. His rump and his shoulder are nice and slick. And, you know, from here, he looks really good. If you run your fingers over his ribs, you can ever so slightly feel his ribs, which is not a bad thing, but you can't see them, which is very good. So I'm going to watch him closely, and it might even be that I can cut him back to, say, 1/3 of a pound here in a few weeks. I just have to keep monitoring everyone's weight closely. Here we have little Shenanigans. He actually has not done as much shedding as the others. His belly is quite furry. You know, to me, he is just a little thin. He still has that young, gangly look to him. And it could just be, you know, where he is in his development. But I'm going to watch him closely because I don't want for him to start to look any thinner. Here we have Snuggles. Snuggles is a very nice, trim looking pony. They have found the bucket that I placed on the ground. But again, I just want to show you Shenanigans because I'm watching him now that he's on a little more grass to see if he should need anything for maintenance or if he will be fine with just the grass and the hay. As I rub my fingers over his ribs, I feel he is putting a little weight on just with that extra grass. And so as I was suspecting, he might not need anything, but I will keep watching because I know you guys are just fighting over the bucket. I'm so sorry. I have had to remove that bucket. It was causing issues. What I was trying to say though is having just run my fingers over Shenanigans' rib area today, and I do it every couple of days. I do always like to put my hands on them, but I am finding that, you know, he's got a little more coverage on those ribs than I felt he had a few weeks ago. and that is likely because he has been getting a little more grass out here. You know, an hour or a couple of hours of higher quality grazing can do a tremendous amount for minis because they're so small. You know, I've even heard that they can ingest in an hour or two their full day's worth of calories. So just being out here in this little side paddock with more grass, I think has been really good for him. But I also recognize that this grass is not going to stay quite as green and rich. It will begin to, you know, die off in the summer with the heat. Not only do I want to mention what the horses are eating and that we're, you know, of course, watching the grass, I also want to talk a little about fly spray and what we're currently using. After I groomed my minis today in the shade of the barn here, you know, trying to duck into the shade whenever we can, I fly sprayed them. And I've been using Piranha, and I've been a real fan of it. I like how it works, not only with the flies, but even the ticks. I feel like I've seen a real decrease in the number of ticks since I've been using the Piranha. But my Piranha was just about empty. And so I bought a new fly spray because I wanted to give it a try. I've heard a lot of people talking about this Ultra Shield Gold. I honestly don't know if it's brand new or if it's been around, but I've heard a lot of chatter about it this spring. And I saw it at the store and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna try it. It is a few dollars cheaper than the Piranha, but again, Piranha's been around for a long time and I just really trust its effectiveness. So it was a little hard to try something new, but I thought, why not, right? If I'm not happy with this, I'll just go and I'll get another bottle of Piranha. But I will say that this smells very different. There are a variety of different ingredients in it. They have one overlapping primary ingredient, both fly sprays. So I know there's a similarity. So we'll see. I mean, perhaps this Ultra Shield Gold really will be better. I'll let you know. You know, it's hard to say and it's hard to try something new sometimes, but now seemed like a very opportune time to do so. I mentioned that the two fly sprays have a very different smell to them. And again, I imagine that's the ingredients that are in them. Something else I also noticed when I used the Ultra Shield for the first time today is the spray. It does come out in a very straight spray. I mean, you can have like a straight stream, or you can have what they consider their broad spray. But it's a very linear broad spray. It was a little different as far as the angles to spray my minis. Again, I'm a creature of habit and I'm so accustomed to using the Piranha. But that was just another thing I did note, not only the smell being very different, but just the sprayer. The sprayer head is designed to give you a very different spray and coverage. I imagine for a larger horse, you know, a full-size horse, this more linear spray might allow you to kind of like swoosh over them, like down their neck, across their shoulder and their midsection and rump. My little minis though, I found that this linear spray was almost shooting above and below them. So I don't know guys. Now something I could do, if I really like this Ultra Shield Gold, I could always then put it into a different sprayer that gives me a smaller, more concentrated spray, so I'm not overspraying my horses and wasting it. That's something I could do. It could just be I need to get used to a new sprayer. That could be it as well. So those are just some things I noted today, and we'll see how it goes. You know, I do want to watch the horses today and kind of see, you know, are they shaking their heads as much? Are their tails swishing? Do they seem to be irritated by the flies? And then the ticks. I'll also really want to keep an eye on the ticks and see if I notice an uptick, in the number of ticks I find on the horses. So we'll see, you know, time will tell. So today is going to be about updates. I told you that, and we've already been giving you some, right? I showed you the garden. I gave you a little garden update. I gave you an update on the horses and what they're eating. But another thing I want to update you on is the stall usage, their run-in usage, right? Because the days are getting hot and sunny, the horses are choosing to duck inside the stalls more frequently and for longer periods of time. And so not only do I pick the stalls now in the morning, which I'm getting ready to do right now, but I also come back and I pick them in the evening because I am recognizing that even during the overnight hours, the horses are spending a fair amount of time in the stall. They do go out and graze, but then they're oftentimes ducking back indoors. And I have noticed that when I put hay out in the field at night, they really don't even touch it. Whereas if I put the hay in the stalls, they do a better job of cleaning it up. So, and when I say cleaning it up, they're not scarfing anything up these days. If you look around the stall behind me, there's a lot of hay just kind of strewn all around. And that's because what they don't eat, I end up using for bedding. You know, rather than just pull it out and throw it away or compost it, I go ahead and I spread it with a little bit of shaving beneath to soak up any sort of moisture. And, you know, it's kind of a multi-purpose approach there. So again, I am now putting their horse hay for the evening in the stalls. I did want to show you the stall. I mentioned that hay that is sort of strewn all around. You know, this is from overnight. I picked it right before dinner last night, so there are several piles in this stall and the neighboring stall. The pile of hay in the back here, that was leftover hay that I've just set to the side, and I will spread that out for bedding someday when we need a little extra. But you can see I've been putting a little hay in the back corner as well as the two front corners. And that is because oftentimes I find not one, not two, not three, but 4 minis hanging out in here together. And I want to make sure that there's plenty of access to hay to nibble on. You might be wondering, why do I put the hay out for bedding, right? I have shavings. I have a whole nother bag of shavings in the tack room next door. But I put just a little bit of shaving out. I feel there's really no need to use anything more than what is necessary to absorb that little bit of moisture should they go to the bathroom. I have found that these little guys do a lot of laying down. They really do enjoy coming into the stalls and laying down and taking a good solid nap. So I want it to be as comfortable as possible. We do have rubber mats in here, so it's not like they're on concrete, but I figure why not make it a softer bed? You know, if they're not going to eat it after picking through it, might as well use it for bedding. And then once it gets soiled, I just, you know, scoop it out with the manure and the wet shavings, and then I'm spreading it. We're still spreading some manure in the far end of our front paddock / ring here behind me. It's very bright. I don't know if you can see it, but we are still spreading a little bit of manure at the far end where the ground is still very much either red clay or the remnants of an old driveway. There's some gravel and rock dust back there that we're just trying to cover up. So we are still spreading our manure, our green manure, but pretty soon we're going to start a compost pile or a manure pile. And then I'll let you in on that once we kind of determine where the best place will be. You know, you don't want it too close to the barn. You don't want it too far away from the barn. But you also need it to be somewhere where your tractor can access it so that you can turn it and then ultimately, you know, scoop it and remove it and use it somewhere. So lots of little things to think about. But right now, we're still just picking and spreading out in the front field. One more thing comes to mind as I'm here in the hay barn. We had a pony break-in a few weeks ago, and by that I mean the minis found an opportunity and they capitalized upon it, and they got into the hay barn, they pulled down some bales, they burst a few of them open. I even have some totes that have just random things under this dog bed. It's now a cat bed. I have totes, and then there's a table with more totes. And, you know, they knocked over the totes. They trampled the belongings that were inside. So they really did make quite a mess. But thank goodness no one got sick. No one got hurt. I mean, it could have been a pretty, you know, significant event. So thank goodness everyone was fine. And the hay here, it's second cutting. I think it's a Timothy mixed grass hay. So it's nothing super rich, you know, thank goodness it was not alfalfa. It was not the grain, you know, the grain room they got into. So we did have a break-in though, and they made quite a mess. I think they had a pretty good time. One of the last chores I have for the ponies this morning is filling our water trough here. It needs to be scrubbed out and refilled, as well as the red tub that is just around the corner in the barnyard. Something that I'll note, now that it is getting warmer and we're heading into the summer months, and because our minis are using smaller troughs, they are short in stature, and so they need water troughs that are shorter, and generally the shorter, lower troughs hold less. Minis, I would say, probably drink less than a full-size horse. So it all makes sense. But something that maybe you hadn't thought about, which I hadn't really thought about until just recently, is because these troughs are smaller and they hold less water, the water that is inside of them tends to get very warm, especially as the water level begins to dip lower. And I'm finding that the horses are really preferring to drink out of whichever of the two troughs has the deepest amount of water, which has, generally speaking, the cooler water. So that's something I want to keep an eye on this summer. It might even be that my troughs need to be filled a little more regularly. One reason I haven't been keeping them filled to the brim is because I'm finding that as the horses drink everything for, a week or a little over, by the time they get close to the bottom, the trough is ready to be scrubbed out, and that has been working well. I don't want to be, dumping out a full trough just to scrub it every other week. But if the horses are needing a larger volume of water to keep it colder so they're more willing to drink, which is very important, that's what I'll do. But I am just noticing that they are definitely preferring to drink out of whichever trough has the largest quantity and therefore the cooler water.
Right on cue, as soon as I finished filling the trough, both Rocky and Shenanigans walked on over and began having a really good drink here. I'm just really happy to see that they can appreciate this clean trough and the cold water within it. Happy horses!
Thank you so much for joining us today for this, almost middle of June update, here on the farm. Here at Care-A-Lot, we stay super busy between caring for the minis, tending to the garden, and mowing the grass. There's always something that needs to be done. So, every now and then we get a rainy day. It's a bit of a day off. I'm not going to lie, but even then, we have chores that need to be done inside the house. So there's always stuff to be done here on the farm, and that's just farm life, But first and foremost, it's caring for the horses, it's tending to the garden, and then it's just general farm upkeep. So we stay super busy. Thanks again for joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed this little update and tour around the farm, and check back soon because, as you know, we're always up to something. Have a great rest of your day. Bye, guys.